Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Renzetti. I am the Director of Alumni Relations at Westminster. It's so great to have you all here today as part of our Beyond the Bridge career development series. And so we used the red bridge on campus as our symbol of sort of connection and possibility after graduation. And so we really want to provide some support and value to our alumni who are out in the world, pivoting in their careers, negotiating their next moves. And so this is really what that series is all about. So I'd love to know where you all are today. If you have the ability to do so, please just type in the chat really quickly where you're coming from or where you're at today. It's always good to see where our alums are calling in from. And as I mentioned, no pressure. You do not have to be off screen. We know, folks are busy. You may be listening in while doing other things. We understand that too. But if you'd like to engage and be off screen, you're welcome to. Great to see. We've got Portland in the house. Love that. New York, Lehigh, Salt Lake. Awesome. Some good representation from around the nation. So, well, I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker for today. Her name is Adrene. Adrene is a career coach in the Career Center here at Westminster and is also working closely with our alumni population when it comes to career coaching. And so just if you all don't know, alumni get access to lifetime of career coaching. And so Adrene can be one of those people who can support you, and you can make an appointment with her for free and continue the conversation past today. So I'll turn it over to Adrene, and I'm here to monitor the chat. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, I might ask questions throughout this. So if you raise your hand, maybe Anna will let me know. Otherwise, chat, because I want to bring you guys the information that you're needing, right? When we do webinars like this, we're trying to cover most of the basics that we can. But as we were talking about before we started, if there's something you would like to go over, then let's do that. Anna told you a little bit about me, career coach at Westminster. Yes, available to alumni. I would love for you guys to make an appointment. There's other amazing career coaches as well. I myself come from military background. I'm an Air Force veteran, but from there I've mostly been in workforce and training and development. This has been my world. There isn't anything, though, that I'm going to cover today that I haven't really experienced for myself. So I know all the ups and downs, the discomforts, right? You already mentioned that today. So I love that. This is a hard topic, and it's one of those I just kind of say we need to lean into. It's okay if you feel uncomfortable, and it's okay if we make some mistakes, because that's how we kind of learn and figure it out, right? We're all human, and it's not a perfect science when it comes to talking about our compensation and what that looks like. It's also extremely hard for some of us to advocate for ourselves. So I like to kind of start out with saying this is really important to understand. And I also like to mention it's not always about ourselves, right? Some of us feel better when we think about how we're helping to do this for other people when we advocate. It helps to set a pattern. It helps for the next person that's hired into that position, all of those things, right? I'm sure, and you can drop in the chat, who here has avoided negotiation or this conversation altogether, right? You're like, I'm just going to take whatever they offer and that's good enough. And I don't want to kind of rock the boat, right? The numbers, though, behind why it's so important. So the compounding cost of not negotiating your first salary, we're talking over $600,000 to $1 million over your career, because every future raise, bonus, retirement match, it's all calculated off of those first numbers, right? So even those small bumps can help with those to start compounding into hundreds of thousands over time. It doesn't sound reasonable, right? But the fear doesn't match the reality either, right? 78% of new hires who negotiated got a better offer. And research shows employers almost never rescind offers over a professional counteroffer. So when I say almost never, that professional counteroffer is the important wording there, right? Because the times that they might end up doing it probably has to do with that professionalism. Okay, but let's get into the meat of it. So 3 moments to negotiate and kind of what to ask for is what I want to go over. During the hiring process is the one most of us are aware of. But after you're employed, there's so many moments to kind of come back to this. And then the third will be, what do those asks look like? Because I want to go beyond just that salary, the number. What are the types of things that we can ask for? Because there is so much more. So during the hiring process, this is where we're kind of doing that work to figure out our worth, and then how do we respond to what they offer, and how do we ask for what we want, right? Before you get the offer, it's really important to do the research and understand the company too. So when I say do the research, you're researching the role, but a director role is going to look a lot different for a large company compared to a startup potentially, right? So understanding the organization or company that you're applying to, is it a nonprofit? Is it that startup? Is it a large organization with plenty of budget? What does that look like? So kind of twofold here. You're researching the organization company, but also the role that you're accomplishing and understanding, what's the median? What are people getting paid? What state do I live in? Is it remote? What are the nuances that go with that? And of course, knowing your bottom line is super, super important. Decide what is like the minimum you would walk away with. And you don't have to pivot away from that, right? And then I always mention this, let the employers name the offer first. And there's ways to kind of pivot away if they ask you, right? You're like, that's a great question. I would love to understand a little bit more about the role. If you have a range in mind, those kinds of things. So always working it that way. Even when we're applying for jobs, sometimes they put expected salary. Some applications you can put negotiable. I always try and encourage to put that in a, just virtual application that you're filling out. And then understanding the full benefits sometimes can be helpful too. That's another way to pivot away if they're asking for your number. I'd love to get a better understanding of the full benefits package. Do you have that available? Then that way you might be like, you know what, I love that number because there's also XYZ that they're offering. There's great flexibility, those types of things. And that's when I go back to like, understand what your number is, but that also includes like what you need. What do you need in life to help balance between work and your personal life? So, okay, but where to research, I think, is something we get brought up a lot. Like, where do I find those numbers? I'm just going to give you 2 ways. There's lots of other, sometimes people go to Glassdoor. Sometimes it's through that informational interviewing. That can be a little more awkward when you're reaching out, asking people like, what do you get paid? Some people don't care. Some people do. Some people might not be allowed to share. So Indeed is a great place to go and just kind of get those average salary ranges. Also, if you're job searching, it can be great because they'll show you job openings. Again, keep in mind this is average. So this is going to be nationwide. It's going to be adjusted based on the state that you're living in, probably cost of living, that sort of stuff. But Indeed can be great for this. If you are okay with a little, sorry, Anna, I saw you come off mute. Is there a question?
Yeah, I just wanted you to know I just put the link in the chat for folks to Indeed salaries. So
Yay, perfect. Thank you so much. And if you like data a little bit more, you don't mind a slightly messier website, would be through the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So I kind of gave you the steps I took here to get to some salary information. So when you're looking at the occupational employment and wage statistics, right, you have to kind of pick your major group, which this one I picked management occupations. And then from management occupations, I picked the advertising and promotions manager. There is a lot more information that BLS will give you. You can get all the kind of job titles under these. There's a lot, but it also helps to give you not just some salary information, but some of the employment information. So This one is if you're one of those people like, I really like to dig in and just have a lot more data. If you're the person at the interview, like, well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can pull all this up, it might be helpful. But so Indeed, I like that one as you're job searching. You can kind of look at the salary. This one is getting a little bit more into the weeds and can be helpful if we're negotiating, during our career too. This can help to give some of that data. So any questions or thoughts before I move on?
Question for you, Adrene. Is PayScale still a website folks are using? That was one I used a lot when I was job searching, was PayScale.
Yeah, PayScale, Glassdoor. Sometimes on LinkedIn, they'll post the salary of the jobs. It's just kind of like, where are you the most comfortable? And some of them have caps, right, where it will eventually ask you to pay to
Yeah.
use. And so it can be just messy. So I kind of chose what are the two least messy ones that aren't going to have those pop-ups of like, login, pay,
Yeah.
whatever.
No, for sure.
You're
Okay.
able to
Yeah.
navigate them without doing that.
Without having to, yeah, like click through a ton of pages and yeah.
Yeah. And for remote jobs, a lot of states have started to make it illegal not to post the offered salary. So even let's say I'm in Utah, which is not one of those states, but I'm applying for a remote position that's based in California. California has to disclose what the salary range is. Just keep that in mind if they try and also say, well, based on your location in Utah, it might be slightly different, but it shouldn't vary significantly, right? I think it's like California, Colorado. I can't remember which other states, but they have to, by law, list what the salary range is. And a lot of times I wouldn't in the past ever even apply for a job that didn't have a salary range because I'm always afraid of wasting somebody's time having no idea. Because as I mentioned earlier, you just never know what the organization's budget is, and their director position is just an example title could be way different than your expectations of salary. So I prefer to have the salary range or try and find people that work there and, hey, what is the typical range for this position kind of thing. The other hard part is knowing what to say when the offer comes in, right? I do prefer when it's in writing, but sometimes we get the verbal and it's a discussion. Two ways. There's either that they're asking you first and you're having to kind of pivot and say those things like, I've done some research on this role and kind of the average salary ranges, but I would love to hear more about what the role's expectations are from you. And if you guys have a range in mind is probably how I would word it. But it's also okay to kind of ask these questions, ask for follow-up. So things like, thank you for the offer. I'm really excited about this role. I feel like I'm just a great fit. Based on my research and experience, I was expecting something a little bit closer to this. Is there any flexibility here, right? And it depends if they give you a range. So a lot of times if they give a range too, they're always going to go a little bit lower. This is when this first response is kind of like, I was kind of more expecting here based on that experience, based on my research. Make sure you actually do the research so you can back it up, right? They might be like, oh, where did you research? And you're like, actually. So it's good to be truthful there. Or you kind of have the secondary one, and we're going to talk more about options and what to ask for. But for example, if you work in nonprofit, higher ed, a lot of those kind of organizations, they're going to have a pretty set range and not a lot of budget to work with. And if you already understand that, then you're going to kind of mention you understand that and then asking for that. Is there flexibility in other areas? Now, this is a really broad response, and they might say like, yes, what do you have in mind? So having kind of that thought in mind of what would this look like instead of just saying, in all of these areas, or they might say specifically, we could do this. I personally like to have something very specific in mind. If it's professional development or if it's flexibility in my schedule, whatever's most important to me at that time in my life, right? With kids, right? It's flexibility. Hey, if I have to run to a doctor's appointment, is that going to be an issue? That sort of stuff. Or professional development, I'm looking to get, certified in this. Is that something you guys would repay, that sort of thing? Um, a lot of times this is happening over email, but I've had it happen verbally too in the moment where you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating. Let me think about this. So, but it's also okay to just word what's going through in your mind, like verbalize it and say, thank you so much. Can I just think about this? Let me write some notes, something like that, right? People are usually going to say yes. This is your livelihood that you're negotiating here. So take the time, take a moment. Don't feel the pressure to just immediately like, that's amazing. Yes, I'll take it. You can have all that excitement, but just make sure you're just taking that pause. Or it's totally understandable to say, thank you. I would love to take this back to my spouse, my partner, so we can discuss this, make sure, it fits in our family budget, planning, whatever that looks like, right? Because a lot of times it's not just you that you're having to consider. I saw you
Hey,
pop off
Adrene.
mute. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question on this that would be, I think, really helpful to the group. Elena has asked, I've been in conversations where the recruiter told me to name your number. I've tried to work around it and get them to tell me what they can offer instead, but they haven't been willing to share that information. What are your thoughts on that? Great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I'm surprised they wouldn't share. So most recruiters, I'm usually not afraid to share with because they're kind of the middleman for you usually. So I'm surprised that they wouldn't share. If they're trying to get you to share, I would kind of say the same thing. It's really dependent on what it. Okay, let me back up my thoughts here. Two thoughts. If it's for one specific job that they're recruiting for, then you'll kind of say something like, I've done my research and I kind of have a range in mind, but I would love to just have more conversation to understand, their expectations, because that would change what I'm looking for, right? It would be dependent on the requirement, the workload, all of that kind of stuff. So it's okay to come back with that. If they are recruiting for multiple jobs and they're helping you, then that's also a hard range to give because you kind of go back to the same thing. I like to do my market research based on the position, so it would really again be dependent on so many things. I'm curious to know about this recruiter though, because usually recruiters are ones you can have those kind of open conversations with, and if they're not sharing it.
Yeah, I actually was a recruiter for a little while at oh my gosh, Pluralsight, which is a online learning company, tech company here in Utah. And so I did recruiting for them for a little bit, and we were kind of encouraged to ask those numbers right out of the gate, pretty upfront, wanting to know what people's number was, but it definitely wasn't like we were seeking information to shut down the opportunity. It was more just like, does this person have a good understanding of the role? Have they done their research? Yeah, do they have a reasonable number in mind? I think having a range in mind is great. And then they'll respond usually with, oh, that's right on track with what we're thinking. Or that might be a little high for us, but we can talk about it later. So like it's just sort of so they can get that out of the way early and often so that if it's way off, if your numbers are way off, they can kind of say, this is probably going to be a little off from what you're thinking. And then that gives you an opportunity to decide, is this the right role for me? That's not necessarily a bad thing. So I was just throwing that out there as I've been a recruiter at a tech company before. So
Yeah, and it's not always 100% a negative thing if you do give them a range. And if they do come back and say something like that, like, it might be a little bit off of what you're wanting, then that's when you're going to come back and talk about full compensation. And you might say something like, well, it might not be. I'm curious to learn what the full benefits package would be. But since I was asked to give a range, I wanted to kind of provide you, what was just on top of mind. So you can also kind of start to open the door for understanding the full compensation. But yeah, I don't think in that situation they're going to just turn you away. They're going to give you more information if it's too much or, too little, but so long as you have done your research and you understand what a good range is, and you can even outline that. You can say, here's kind of the range I had in mind based on my experience, the research I have done. It's definitely negotiable and dependent on what is needed for this role and the full benefits package, something like that, right? Hopefully worded more professional and not just off the top of Adrene's head, but you can put all of that in
I
there
think that
too.
sounds pretty good, Adrene.
Yeah.
Honestly. This language is so hard. It feels so foreign. And I think that sounds really great, because normalizing these conversations is so important because they feel scary, but being brave and just saying, yeah, I'm happy to, talk more about this as we go through the process. Like, I think that's great language.
Yeah. And it's very rare again that it won't open the door to a conversation. And again, I always say like the person next to you is going to ask, so you might as well. You don't want to come in under your worth because, you're just like, I'm just going to give them this. And but also be fair, right? It's very rare that if you give a range, they're going to go over that range, although I have heard of it and seen it happen. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, I love that question. And again, it's probably going to depend on the recruiter, the type of recruiter that you're working with. And, now just trying to have if you're having a conversation with a recruiter in this kind of job market, then that's amazing because they're so swamped right now. Busy. Okay. So quick, just kind of do's and don'ts for this negotiating during the hiring process. Again, practice that advocating for yourself, really think it through. What are you looking for? Know what your bottom line is. Reach out for the informational interviews to learn more, not necessarily what the specific salary might be, but the expectations of the role, that sort of stuff. Don't start negotiating too soon. They haven't given you a number. Sometimes people might want to ask right at the end of the first interview. It's usually more of a second interview, or if there isn't a second interview, they're going to contact you for the offer. And if you've already gone through the interview, then you might as well just wait to see what they're going to say. Arguing about it, right? This is what I was talking about, where offers may be rescinded if maybe they're lacking that professionalism. If it's not going to be a good fit, it's not going to be a good fit, but arguing probably won't get you anywhere. There's professional ways to make your case, so it doesn't mean you can't argue in a very polite way. And don't give what salary you're wanting too early unless it's brought up, or, don't like die on that sword not giving it up. As Anna mentioned in her recruiting days, if somebody gave a range, it gave more information, they were able to have a conversation. So this is very gray area, but I always say just like kind of pause before you're giving those numbers and think through kind of what that looks like. But I like to have the quick do's and don'ts, yeah, because people get really antsy and they'll just be like, well, here's what I want to make. Is that what you're willing to offer, kind of things, right? So just to recap this part, really preparing with that data. I mean, you guys probably know, especially as alumni, any employer is impressed, or recruiter, during the interview process when they know you've done your research, not just on the salary side, but you understand this role and the company that you're wanting to work for. And then understanding the market value. What is the average in your area? What does that look like? Gauging that timing. When is the appropriate time to have that conversation? Again, usually not right at the first interview unless they're bringing it up and then you guys are rolling into that conversation. Practice. I mention this so much, and it's the most awkward part of this. Same with when we talk about mock interviews, because we do a lot of those at the Career Center. They can feel so awkward, but even if it's just with yourself, a friend, a mentor, having these conversations and kind of bouncing things off really help with muscle memory when stress is high. So when we're stressed, we're like, I don't know what I want right now. And you just kind of anxiety and all the uncertainty. When we practice, it helps to just pull that into your brain, right? It's that muscle memory, and it doesn't take as long then. Our amygdala is that fight or flight and our reactive state. We need it in the frontal lobe to respond, but it takes a minute to get back and forth between the two. But when we commit something to memory, it's a lot quicker. And then we're pulling from that memory, which helps the amygdala. Sorry for a little bit in the weeds there, but I like that visual for me because it helps remind me when I'm like going to be reactive to like, wait a minute, it's not in the right part of my brain yet. But the practice will give you that memory to help. Okay, so now you're employed. I want to talk about negotiating once we're employed, but I'll pause really quick. Anna, is there anything to answer for this before I move on? Are we good?
I think we're good unless anyone wants to put an additional follow-up question or any other questions on this sort of pre-job offer portion. Feel free to throw it in, and if not, we'll keep moving. But Julian said the visual you just gave was really helpful. Maritza says she practices with AI when it comes to salary negotiation, which I thought was cool, and probably helpful just so you're not just talking to a mirror, I guess. I'm sure AI responds a little bit, which is interesting.
I love that.
Yeah.
My only suggestion with AI is make sure that it's set up to give you that like unbiased information. So depending on which AI platform you're using, you can a lot of times in the setting specifically say things like, don't be too nice to me, right? You could say it in a much different way, but hey, act like this employer here or something like that. So that's the only funny part about AI, right? When it's like, you gave an excellent response to that. And you're like, did I? Or are you just being really nice right now?
I actually
Well,
asked it.
mine would say I did wonderful no matter what. Probably. Like my chat GPT.
I asked it if it was programmed to give me positive responses, and if it was to not give me positive responses. I so I think my question is going to fall in between this question, this slide, and the next slide. I was in a really awkward position where during the interview process, I got a notice of a promotion coming my way that took me out of the scale for the job offer because I'm in New York and they tell you, and it's a higher ed. So I knew there was going to be no flexibility. And, like I didn't know how to handle that. In the end, it kicked me in the butt, but that's okay. It's a learning experience. But keep that in mind as you go through because we might circle back to that.
Okay, yes.
I've never had that happen before, but that was really, and that was something I did not practice with AI. So I totally screwed up that conversation.
If I don't cover something, there's a specific question, drop it in the chat. And so we'll cover it. But yeah, the AI thing's funny. Oh, one more tip too is tell it it's like for somebody else. I need to practice this for my, coworker, whatever. It's meaner to other people. I don't know why. Any writing you have analyzed sometimes is better to be like, this is for not me. Okay. So a lot of times though, we don't think of the negotiation process as ongoing or think or recognize those openings for it. So I want to kind of go over some tips for this. And I have done this and it was scary, but it was so beneficial. And it really allowed me to bring my career forward in ways that if I didn't take that risk, like they weren't going to come to me and be like, can we throw more money at you? Like, of course not. So kind of understanding what does that opening look like, right? I mean, we're usually not going to just say, hey, I deserve a raise. Be prepared. I kind of look at everything like I'm going in for a court case and I'm a lawyer. Like, let me have like my whole argument in a very nice professional way. But I've done the research. There just really is no saying no unless you just really don't have the ability to do this is kind of how I like to look at it. But Maybe it's after a big project wrapped up, a clear win. The scope grows and now you have more responsibility, and more doesn't always mean, it doesn't equal exactly to more, right? When I say more responsibility, maybe bigger responsibility, because hopefully you're advocating to not have more added to your plate, because with addition should come some subtraction, but the scope of your role is growing. Or you have review cycles, monthly, quarterly, whatever that looks like, or annually, at the minimum, but maybe it's that annual review that's coming up. So looking for those openings. When to raise the conversation. So as I said in the last slide, like maybe you have established one-on-ones. I generally don't have these conversations as like individual meetings, like, hey, can I set a meeting with you? But you can if you don't have the opportunity at these kind of established meetings. One-on-ones, review cycle annually, or you're setting a separate meeting and saying, hey, I'd really love to have a conversation, just catch up on where my role is at and where I would like to go, that kind of thing. Or know who you're meeting with, right? I had a boss that really loved when I kind of packaged everything beforehand and gave him time to think on it. So I would send him, hey, this is what I'm going to review with you. And I'd kind of send him my document. And so then when we got to the meeting, it wasn't just like, I'm going to throw all this at you. It's, hey, if you've had time to review, let's go over it. What are your thoughts, kind of thing, right? And then, as I mentioned, when I prepare for this, it's like going in for a case. So bring specifics. What I'm working on really at Westminster to teach a lot of the students too is to start working on what I call a brag book. And that's documenting what you're doing. I just moved my daughter into Westminster and I'm telling her the same thing. She has a community service event Thursday. And I said, hey, when you get back to your dorm, write down what you did. How long was it? How many people did you help? What did that look like? So it can be ugly. It's just a Word doc of like, here's what I did. So that helps when it comes back to bringing specifics. Because again, when we're in the role, we're in the job, we're also not often thinking of updating our resume, updating our LinkedIn. We're just kind of like, I'm doing great. I love this job. I'm succeeding. But we go back to like, what do those accomplishments look like? What are the results that you're having? And nobody else is potentially going to be tracking that for you. So that's where those specifics come in. How many projects? What did you achieve? What did it look like? All that kind of stuff. So not just, hey, I've been here 5 years, so I probably deserve it now, right? Name the number or range that you want. So again, if you make them guess, like it's easier to say no, like, we don't really have the budget, or they'll come under. So saying like, this is my current salary, but this is what I would like to be making now. And then frame it as the company investing in continue impact, right? It's not a favor. So usually what I say is, this is what I have accomplished, but this is where I'm going, right? And yes, it's focused on the goals the organization has set for me. This is how I'm going to do it, but it's a good justification too for why, like, I now deserve this number, right? And if the answer is no, I have gotten a no. I eventually turned it into a yes down the road, right? But it's okay to ask, understandable. Usually they'll give you a reason why it's a no, but maybe you can ask, what would it look like realistically? What would the timeline look like to get to a yes? And, normally it could be, I don't know, ho hum, and you can bring it up maybe the next quarterly or something. Or they might say, you know what? When this year's budget comes, I do feel like it would be impactful to add this. And so that's kind of where I come full circle with the whole package here, right? But Maritza, I'd love to know, like, what else do you need from this conversation?
I mean, honestly, everything you're saying is is either validating some of the stuff I did or pointing out things that I missed, which is what I wanted to get out of this. And I didn't realize we had support, so I'll probably be scheduling a meeting to kind of go over what I did, lessons learned, and how to better approach things in the future. Yeah. Which
That
is
would
funny
I
because
oh, sorry.
I used to work at the Career Center for Working Professionals at NYU Stern, but that was almost 20 years ago. And like there were things I was doing where as I was doing it, there was a bell ringing in the back of my head saying you're not supposed to do this or say this. But you know, like out of sight, out of mind, out of practice.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Anna, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to ask a question that I think I've heard some folks kind of ask before in this regard of like, how soon is too soon, to ask to start having a conversation about a salary increase when you're at a new job? Like, can you do it 6 months in? Is that too soon? Should I wait a year? Like, do you want to wait a year so you can like show your value and your worth and then ask like when is too soon, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and I'm not going to give you a great answer. It's very gray. I would say it's very much dependent on where you're working, what the job feels like. If you feel like at 6 months you have just brought enough value to have this conversation, or, I've been in the middle of working on degrees while working full time. And so I might finish the degree and like, hey, I've now added this additional education on top of everything we've accomplished in 6 months. So it's really going to be dependent. I don't feel like earlier than 6 months would ever make sense because you're still just getting to learn so much about roles. But if they move you up positions, or even if it feels lateral, but you're like, now I have more responsibility, like that could be a good time. Or if just like I said, the scope of the role is changing, then it's a good opening. But I would say definitely it's usually not statistically going to be sooner than the first 6 months to a year. But yeah, it depends on the role, what you're accomplishing, kind of know the organization too, and if they're going to have room for that. If it's like fast growing and they're just like hiring more and more people and there's more responsibility, and then you're going to want to jump on that wagon too and be like, I'm here for this and I've accomplished all of this, so now's probably the time. But did you
I
have something else to
have,
ask?
yeah, we have another, like a comment, or actually a question in the chat. So, what if I exceed expectations and accomplish all my goals? However, the manager tells you that there is no budget for a higher salary or that you are already a highly paid employee. There is always a discussion after that about what I need to do to reach the next level, and management says that their hands are tied. And then we got someone who said same, or the scope changes, but they still don't have budget to pay more.
Yes. Okay, perfect transition to the next set of slides. So I'm going to pause that question because I'm going to answer it, hopefully.
Great.
Really quick though, before I kind of go through my recap, Marita, I just want to say, like, yes, make an appointment with us. We can do those mock salary negotiations. We can talk through it. We can review what you've put together. We're more than happy to do that. So please utilize the Career Center. We love that. And we do virtual. I know you're New York, so we do virtual or in-person appointments. But just let me wrap this up and get to the next one, because I think you guys, this will fit perfect with your question. But again, with the data, right? So always just be prepared. Same information we share with everything from your resume tailored to the job, interviewing, the salary negotiation, asking after you're employed, just having that data, naming the ask, and then the compensation is just that one lever, right? And so that's what we're going to kind of get into here, which I think you guys are going to love. So talking about beyond the paycheck, right? It's not in the budget. I don't know when we'll have, all those kinds of things. So it's not always about what will show up in your paycheck, that salary. I've kind of learned this over the years too. So I hope some of you are younger and get to take this away much sooner than I have in my career. But for me, there was some big things I wanted for work-life balance, for continued education. When I transitioned out of the military, I got to have the opportunity to say, oh, now my family comes first. So it was really big for me to have flexibility after having no flexibility. And so those were things that I love to ask for. But What can we ask for? So if I was dealing with the manager, the supervisors, director, whatever title, and they were saying like, we just don't have room for that, then I would be looking at this sort of stuff like, what could I tweak that's going to help my personal life, professional life, my career moving forward, even if it's a title change. Well, hey, but I'm taking on these extra roles. I did this once where I came in as like an associate, but I was the only employee with like the associate researcher title or something. And I was like, well, it doesn't make sense because like I'm owning the department. So it would make more sense if I was like, I can't remember. I ended up director, but I just asked for a title change and they agreed. And this was actually within the first 6 months because we were building this role. And so once I met with him and said, hey, now that we've kind of built this and based on what I'm doing, I feel like it would make more sense if this was my title. And he was like, yeah, I agree. So we changed my title and that wasn't anything to do with compensation. Or if there's something you want to learn and you're like, but is there ability to kind of cross train and that gives you more skills to add to your resume and think about you, not the organization. What do you need and want out of this? And what career path are you trying to take? And what does that next step look like for you? They might have other buckets in their budget. So could that be professional development? If they're like, no, we have no money, right? I might be asking for an increase in paid time off or, is there any kind of mentorship program? Some organizations also offer time off for volunteer. If you're like, okay, well, there's not room for that, but for my work-life balance or for my needs, my mental health, I have this organization I love to work with. One day a month, I would like to go work for that organization and not have it impact my PTO. And so I would be looking for those ways. Is it always fair and amazing? Like, no, of course we want, hey, I'm worth this salary. Can I get this salary? If that's not possible, I just don't want you to give up and not think of what else can I maybe have that's going to help me. Well, maybe you're looking for that next opportunity at another organization, right? Because we can't always fix everything as many times as we ask for it. So yeah, I would be thinking, what could I ask for? So I'll give you guys an example, right? Again, I work for Westminster in higher ed. The salaries are pretty well set. And I already knew that coming in. However, because I value that flexibility and we work a hybrid schedule, that was important to me. But the other important thing is I teach other workshops for another university. And exactly what I said, hey, once a month, I would like to go teach this workshop. It's valuable to you as a university because I'm in front of employees, employers, and I'm teaching concepts that are important, but also I get to hear information from them that I can bring back to the students about like what's happening in your organization and that type of stuff. So I do that without it negatively impacting my PTO. And then I also take a week once a year. I go to a Stanford conference from a leadership thing that I did. So same ask. I said, I would really love to take this week, go get this education and not have it impact my PTO. So those were things that I negotiated. The Stanford one was funny because they came back and said, yes, but will you bring back what you learned? And I was like, okay, like sold. Absolutely, right? Win-win. So what is going on in your life that could be impacted by a change that you could ask for, right? And I do have just some little examples of what those asks can kind of look like. When we write these down too, they sometimes look very formal. And my professional writing is formal if I'm going to be emailing a supervisor. If you're having a conversation, it's not going to be as formal, but if you have worked on practicing this, it'll be easier to say. But, I would not say like memorize it. So you're like, given the new responsibilities I have taken on, I would love to discuss, but it's good to write it out and have an idea. So I'll kind of pause there. Was there any chat, extra questions, thoughts? Or if anybody has any, add them about this. Hopefully that answered the previous one too.
Here's a comment. I've tried that as well and have been told no to everything. I was literally told that I should leave the company because they couldn't offer me anything more. I listened and I left the company.
Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's something that I was thinking too, is like sometimes it feels like if you're not being valued and you're not being paid for your value, that sometimes it's just like it's a misalignment and it's not a good
Yeah.
fit. And sometimes you do have to leave a company to grow a little more.
Yeah, and you're not alone in doing that. I mean, research definitely shows, specifically based on millennials, right? The job hopping, as they call it. I call it building a portfolio career, but they call it job hopping. But it's really been shown it's a necessity in order to kind of progress in your career sometimes. It's not a negative thing, right? You're gaining experience, you're figuring out that next step, and you don't owe the company anything, right? They're not your family, they're not who you're like answering to. So you have to kind of know, this goes back to knowing that bottom line. It's not just when you're negotiating a salary incoming, it's what does your career look like, what makes sense for you financially, and what do you deserve, because you do work hard for that. So and we all have to make a living, and we all have different things we have to support. And so I understand you can't always just be like, I'm going to leave that job and that's it. But taking a look at it and figuring out, okay, what does my next step look like? So I 100% back what you said. Like, they said I should leave and I left. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've done that for career progression myself. I've hit a ceiling and I'm like, I look around, I don't really have anywhere else to go, but I have other goals. So what comes next for me? And I'll tell you guys a funny story. So, speaking of recruiter asking, what salary, I worked with a recruiter before when I was transitioning, and, they were like, well, we really want to make sure that, I'm going to negotiate more from what they're offering, because we want to make sure you're at least getting, I don't remember what it was, 10% more than what you were making. And this probably isn't there yet. And I was like, yeah, no, I would like a little bit more. I never disclosed what I was currently making, and it was well over the 10% from where I was going. So again, it goes back to, like, you also don't always have to disclose that sort of stuff, because I knew I was worth what they were offering me at this next position, right? Because I was coming from kind of a nonprofit world. So you don't have to be like, wait, don't offer me more. Here's where I was at. Like, understand your worth and be able to just speak for that and negotiate for that. And sometimes it's a little bit of fake it till you make it, of like that imposter syndrome and like, I don't know, am I promise you that next person's going to come behind you and ask for more, and they might not even have as good of work ethic or experience that you have. So yeah, sometimes there isn't that flexibility, and it does take finding the next place and understanding what that looks like for you, whether it's monetary or you're getting creative and asking for some of these things. And I can tell you, I've been happier at less money with more flexibility, or happier with more money because they understood my value, right? So you just never know. But yeah, if you guys look me up on LinkedIn, you will see I have definitely had what I like to call that portfolio career, where I have, where do I need to go now? And what does this decade look like for me? And what experience do I want? What's happening in my life? Because things change. My education has changed, my experience, my location, my life circumstances, right? Like, now I'm an empty nester and I just feel like I need more work, probably, because what am I going to do with my time? But be creative when it comes to these asks, right? Like, what do you need, and thinking about that. And hopefully just some of the examples I give today help. And what do you want? Gym time, the title, the, flexibility. I love currently in our office, if it's like, hey, I'm going to go to the gym over lunch, I'm not necessarily paying back that hour, like, okay, but you better get back that time. They just trust that we're adults and we're going to get the work done. And it's probably good for my mental health to go and unplug. And then I'm going to come back and give twice the amount of work. So, and these are important things to keep in mind as you guys kind of end up with leadership roles, and you have staff, because you learn how to provide this. And I've even done things where I've had a team and we've gamified things, and it made their day for something so little to have just fun things where we're nominating people for silly awards and things like that. So there's so many ways that you can find that balance, the flexibility, things that you want at work, but we don't really commit time to sit down and think like, what does this look like? What can I really have that would make my day that much more enjoyable? Shifting schedules sometimes. Hey, there's a lot of traffic. Can I work earlier, later? Does that work for the office? That sort of thing. I've done things like that as well. But yeah, what makes it worth it? And that's all I have for my slides before I get to the final slide, and I can definitely keep talking, but I want to pause in case there's more so we can kind of get to your guys' questions, thoughts. We have a few minutes we've left to be able to do that. So Anna, I'll revert to you for the chat, but guys, please add to the chat if you have a thought or question.
Yes. So there was some like continued conversation about this new norm around employers like saying no and that there's no budget and then being like, oh, then you should just go and letting people leave, and that's kind of new and different from maybe like the old norm of like loyalty in employees and like really valuing loyalty. And I think that's just like a value mismatch too. Like if you're with a company that's willing to let you go and doesn't see your value, it's like, okay, bye. I'll find an organization that, values my loyalty and, wants to help me grow in a company. I mean, usually like what I've experienced is like when you ask for a salary increase or you ask for more professional development, it's a really positive thing. They go, this person wants to invest their time in our company. They want to grow for us. And I think that, you want to be in a company that sees it that way, not like, oh, this greedy person, bye. Like, we don't need you. No, like they want to be afraid to lose you, I think, most of the time. And even if they say, I can't give you more, but we really, you are a valued member of this team, and what else can we do? They should be willing to work with you. And if they're not, it's probably not the right company for you, honestly.
Hard one.
Yeah. Oh, and I put your LinkedIn profile in the chat,
Yeah.
if that's okay. You
Oh,
mentioned,
yes.
I was like, yeah.
I'll tell you, I share it when I do workshops all over. And I
Great.
always say, feel free to reach out. It's a very minimum amount that follow through. And those that do are usually the ones putting in the work to, get all this done and get to where they want to be. I will say this, sometimes depending on the market, right? It makes things more difficult to have that leverage. Right now, we're in that difficult side where the employers have slightly more power. It ebbs and flows and it'll come back around. But we do see that a little bit where they're just like, well, go, there's 100 other applicants behind you. That's usually to their detriment. It costs the company more money. It is harder to kind of train somebody, the time and investment it takes to do that. So the smart ones aren't just going to be like, we want to keep you because they're amazing. Hopefully they're looking at the bottom line. It's smarter to keep you, to make you happy, because the money they're going to spend hiring somebody else, that, that's what you wish they would kind of throw your way. So yeah, that can be hard. And again, I understand we can't all up and leave our jobs. So I do not have that expectation where I'm like, forget them then and just walk away. Sometimes it takes that balance.
Great. And we have some folks asking how they can make an appointment for you. And I just put your email in the chat. I hope that's okay. They can email you and then you can send them the link to schedule. Does that work?
Yeah, that works fine.
Okay.
It's through Handshake, but I know with our alumni, some of you guys need that updated. So emailing me, it would probably be the fastest, and we can get something on the calendar. So, and we do everything. We do interviewing, resume, salary negotiation. Sometimes I even do things that aren't listed. I was talking entrepreneurship because I've had several businesses, and so I've met with students about that. So honestly, anywhere you guys are at, we try and meet you or at least get you to like some really good resources. But yeah, my email would be great. Thank
And
you.
then we do have another question, if that's okay. I think there's still time.
Yeah,
We have 5 more minutes.
do it.
Nicole asks if you're currently in a role and have been told you're eligible for a promotion/pay increase, and there's been no follow-up for months. Is it appropriate to request a timeline for that advancement, or do you have any other advice for someone in that position?
100% it's appropriate. Hey, just following up to this email, I would love to know the timeline, or can I schedule something for us or get a quick 15 minutes on your calendar to talk about what the next steps look like for this? This is one of those moments I'll tell you, lean into the discomfort of the panic of like, I don't know, I don't want to poke the bear. Like, if maybe they'll take it away. It sounds like you're already doing the work that's deserving that. And, they're probably a tiny bit mistaken in not following through. So I would 100%. I mean, I wouldn't even let much time go. It'd probably be the next week. And I'd be like, oh, hey, a week ago, you mentioned this. Is this scheduled for our next one-on-one? Can I schedule something? So I always, as long as it's professional and like nice, what are they going to say? Like, how dare you ask me about this thing I told you you would get? Then it would be a bad place to work for, probably. But yes, I would say follow up.
Great question. Any other questions from our group on salary negotiation, compensation conversations, anything? We are here for it as we have a few more minutes. Well, maybe we could just move to the final slide, Adrene. Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad this has been informative for you all. Do not hesitate to reach out to Adrene, as she is here as one of our alumni career coaches. We are here for you. We want to support you. We want to see you all thrive. As Westminster alums, you are a part of a really great community and a great network. And so let us support you in your career and in any career pivots you might be trying to make. There is a QR code here for any feedback. If you all could just share any feedback for us on this webinar. As you know, this is a new series, and so we really want to know how to improve these for the future. I think the survey has like 6 quick questions, and then there is also an opportunity to identify other topics of interest. So if you have time, please do our survey, and then there is a QR code there for future sessions. Our next session is on Wednesday, September 16th, about humanizing work, and we have one of our fantastic alums/faculty members in our entrepreneurship department here in the business school, Charlie Warner, who's leading out on that conversation. If you've ever felt burnt out, yeah, if you've ever felt burnt out, if you've had coworkers that are difficult, if work just feels like it robs you of all your time, this is such a great conversation and webinar to be a part of. And it's definitely one you could just listen in on and get some little nuggets from. So if you'd like to attend our September one, please do. And then there will be some other sessions as well in October and November from some of our other alums and faculty. So we appreciate you all being here on your breaks and on your lunches. Westminster is here for you. We miss you. We do. We really do. And yeah, thanks to Adrene for, leading out on our first session. We appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a really great rest of your Wednesday. And we hope to see you at a future session.